Hello, anyone, and welcome to the Delegate training for TogetherMUN 2. My name is Yair Peleg, and I'm one of the secretaries. Malik, can you introduce yourself too?
Hello everyone, welcome to this delegate training of TogetherMUN 2. We hope that this would be helpful and we expect you to watch this throughout because we do have our amazing staffers with us who would be giving out their amazing tips and tricks for being the best delegate. And yeah, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Malik and I'm from India and I am really excited and pumped up for the conference.
Okay, so can we move to the next slide? Okay, so we'll start with who we are, and we'll get to know our coaches. Then I'll introduce to you about what is MUN, and we'll explore together the basic definitions of all MUN procedures. Then our GHS will explain to you about the RP of the GA committee, which is UN for MUN. And then in the crisis committees, we'll explain to you about the RPs of the crisis committees. And some crisis chairs will be there. Next slide. Then after, we'll have about tips on how to research for the conference and more tips and tricks by our coaches. Afterwards, we'll answer your questions and we wish you good luck and see you at the conference at January 2nd. Next. So, who we are. It's time to get to know your coaches. So, first of all, who we are firstly. Malik, can you continue? So TogetherMUN is a virtual Model United Nations conference that will be held on Zoom. Over one day, our students will be transformed into characters and delegates from different countries all over the world, and they will be asked to solve world problems using MUN, diplomacy, and peaceful tools. We're very happy to hold our second conference on January 2nd, which is in 1 week exactly, and we hope that you're all going to be there. And now, please welcome your coaches. So you've met Malik, and now let me talk. I want to talk to you about myself. So my name is Yair. I'm the secretary and co-founder of TogetherMUN. I'm 17 years old from Israel. I'm in 11th grader, and this is the one of the so TogetherMUN was an amazing conference, but TogetherMUN 2 will be more amazing. It will have more amazing chairs that you're going to meet just in a minute. And let me introduce you to some of them. First of all, let me introduce Deepika and Emilia. Introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, so my name is Amelia. I'm 16 years old and I'm from the sunny island country of Singapore. And I'm honored to be able to chair the G20 as I believe that the issues are extremely prevalent to today's society.
Hello everyone, my name is Deepika, but you can just call me Dips or Deeps. And I am so honored to be here for the second edition of TogetherMUN. I've been in about 20 MUNs up until now. I've also worked as the Secretary General, and seriously, Yer and Malik are doing a great job, and it's so awesome to be here. And I hope to see you guys in the Human Rights Council.
Okay, next up, we'll give you Matthew and John Nicholas.
Hello everyone. So my name is John Nicholas Nang, but you can call me Nick because that's my nickname. I am going to be one of your staff members for the JCC USA Joint Crisis Committee, and I'm really honored to be part of TogetherMUN 2.0. I believe the space race has been a very prevalent issue, especially in the historical past and the stuff that and how it's affected the world today. And therefore, I'm really happy to be moderating the discussion of this issue, and I'm really looking forward to working with everyone.
Okay.
Hey y'all, my name's Matthew. I'm a high school sophomore from Austin, Texas, in the United States. And I have around, I believe, 3+ years of MUN experience. It is a total honor to be here and to serve alongside John Nicholas on the Joint Crisis Committee. And I hope to see you there. Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays too. And finally, please welcome Gregory and Max from the USSR side of the JCC.
Do you want to go first, Max?
Sure. Hi everyone. As the previous staffers said, it's an honor to be here. I personally don't have as much experience with Model UN, but I'm very excited for this conference. We've been working very hard to make this a great conference for you. And my role is basically, along with Gregory, we're going to be helping the USSR kind of run as a JCC, and hopefully we'll get some really good ideas out there and create some good directives, and I'll have a good time. So I'm excited to meet you.
Hello, I'm Greg. I live in Cambridge in the United Kingdom. I'm an international baccalaureate student. I am studying Cold War history at the moment, and I must say I think it's one of the greatest areas of history in the world, and particularly the space race, for me, encapsulates all of the turmoil of that entire century, the 20th century. And so I'm very excited to be alongside with Max, kind of helping the USSR to navigate what was an incredibly hard situation to go through. I've been asked by the chairs just to give you a sort of a taster to what the staffers are here to do for you. Me and Max, as well as the staffers for the US, will be there to help you run your countries as a cabinet and to navigate through the space race. What that includes is that we'll also kind of dip in and out of roles to help you. For example, if you want to confer with foreign diplomats, for example, if you wanted to talk to, say, the General Secretary of the Polish Communist Party, I would proverbially leave the room and come back as the General Secretary of the Polish Communist Party, and we can have a chat on what the USSR can do alongside with Poland, and you can do that with every other country if you like. And I'm very much looking forward to doing that and a whole lot of other stuff with you. It's going to be a busy conference. It's going to be a fun conference. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we'll talk about what is MUN. Malik, can you please continue? So, Model United Nations is basically an academic simulation of the United Nations, where students play the role of delegates from different countries and attempt to solve real-world issues with the policies and perspective of their assigned countries. For example, a student will be assigned to the United Kingdom, and they will ask to present the United Kingdom and give the United Kingdom's opinion about the world issue that they are debating. Next. We'll now talk about the two committees that will be at TogetherMUN 2. The two kinds of committees. Sorry about that. This is live stream after all. So first of all, the General Assembly committees, which are G20 and the Human Rights Council. So in General Assembly committees, they are generally focusing on one issue or topic, and they only typically have one resolution at the end. In Crisis, which is the JCC, Joint Crisis Committee on the Cold War, it is more dynamic as the crisis committees, and they have to react to crisis updates, and they revolve around directives. And don't worry, we're going to tell you about what is a directive and what's going to be in it.
So at TogetherMUN 2.0, we are simulating three committees, which are UNHRC, G20, and JCC. UNHRC at this edition of TogetherMUN would be debating on the slave labor and debt bondage in the Southeast Asia and Middle East. G20 at the second edition of TogetherMUN would be debating to curb international tax evasion and money laundering. And lastly, our crisis committee at this edition of TogetherMUN would be revolving around the space race that happened after the launch of Sputnik 1, I think Sputnik 2,
Okay.
and it would be a JCC on the space race.
And now, Malik, can you continue with the slide? And now, please welcome to talk about the GA committees, Amelia and Deepika.
Hello again. Amelia, would you like to say hello once more? And then we can get started.
Hi everyone, so I'm Amelia and this is the lovely Deepika and we'll be explaining more about GA committees, specifically the UNHRC as well as the G20. So Deepika will be explaining more and then she'll pass the time over to me.
Okay, so before we move to the next slide, I'll just tell you in short what is a GA. So GA is actually an abbreviation for the General Assembly. So there are about 6 main committees of the General Assembly, and for TogetherMUN, we'll be having UNHRC and G20, and I will be the head chair for UNHRC, which is the United Nations Human Rights Council, which talks mainly about human rights, like which pertain to the entire world. I think we can go to the next slide. So, General Assembly committees, basic rules of procedure. So, the flow of debate has 3 phases. So, formal meeting, which is the speakers list, or you can also call it a general speakers list. We have the formal informal meeting, which is actually caucusing, and action phase, which is the voting or adoption of consensus. The speakers list is the main component of the flow of formal debate. So basically, what happens here is that it covers the opening speeches. What are opening speeches? In short, they are actually speeches where you introduce about your committee, like about the committee and what your country is and how exactly your stand is on the agenda. Now, caucusing is a parliamentary term which has been used in the past as a substitute for informal debate. Proposals for these sessions can be made by raising a motion to suspend the meeting. So the majority of the committee's time should be spent in informal meetings to better reflect the realities of backroom and corridor negotiations at the UN or the United Nations. Amelia, you can take over.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be explaining more about GA committee, so the General Assembly Committee. I will be co-chairing the G20, which stands for the Group of 20, which is an international forum that includes 19 countries as well as the EU, which is the European Union. And this comprises of the world's most advanced countries. So yeah. Anyway, so to speak more about GA committees, so first of all, countries will meet in regional blocks to develop a common position on the agenda item, and then following which they will move on to meeting with other regional groups to merge resolutions and develop a final text that is adopted by consensus. So it is very important that you know your stance and your country's stance, because it is very important that you must stick with it, and you must also find alliances with countries who share the same view. So you cannot be North Korea, for example, and you decide to partner with the United States of America. It doesn't exactly make sense. So it's very important for delegates to stick to their stances. And also, this differs a bit because we're using the UN for MUN procedure. So points like of POIs, such as point of information, personal privilege, and inquiry used in conventional procedure are not recognized or used in the United Nations setting. Therefore, UN for MUN only recognizes a point of order, which will only be used against the chairperson if a delegate believes that the chairperson has been at fault regarding the procedure. So most of the time, we use POI loosely for other things, but in UN for MUN, it will strictly only be used if you believe that the chairperson has used the ROP wrongly, and therefore you can raise a POI. And also, the main difference between UN for MUN ROP as opposed to Simon or the UN USA or even the Harvard ROP is definitely the fact that UN for MUN strongly focuses on diplomacy and the importance of it. Therefore, the former procedures is to shift the focus from competition to cooperation, and thus from formal to informal debate. It is not points or rhetoric made during formal speeches, but a hard groundwork of background negotiations that must be prioritized. Producing a text that is acceptable to the entire committee and can be adopted unanimously by the committee is the ultimate goal, and this is the goal of the UN. So UN for MUN definitely focuses more on cooperation as opposed to other kind of ROP. And we hope that delegates will be reminded that the point is to learn on the importance of diplomacy and working with one another, because this is the main job of the UN for MUN ROP. Next slide. Okay, so other differences also include the roll call. So in other MUN procedures, most of the time the roll call, you will either respond with present or present and voting. However, roll call in the UN for MUN procedure is much easier, as the delegate only needs to respond as present without considering whether he, she, or them will vote at the end or not, like in the case of conventional procedure. Additionally, at the end of the speakers list, conventional procedure dictates that the committee must directly go into voting. In the case of UN for MUN procedure, delegates who have been granted the right to reply by the chair during debate take their time after the speakers list is closed. In the conventional procedure, the right is granted mostly in writing or during the course of debate.
All right, so documentation and decision making. So, one of the most striking features of the UN Foreman procedure is that, in line with the realities of the UN, most decisions adopted by the General Assembly and even by the Security Council are made by consensus. The leadership structure and rules of procedure should support a working environment that encourages delegates to build consensus rather than promoting one upmanship. Some of the major points of distinction in the resolution process are as follows. As stated before, the discussion phase is where the resolution process begins, and countries first meet in regional blocks to develop a common position on the agenda item. They then prepare a single draft resolution that has the whole region's support, and then move on to meeting with other regional groups to merge resolutions. Thus, the entire committee must together develop a final text that is adopted by consensus. So, according to UN Foreman trainers, 80% of the GA's resolutions are passed by consensus.
Okay, so next I'll be explaining more about resolutions. So in the conventional procedure, a draft resolution may be submitted only after it has gathered a specific number of signatories. However, UN for MUN definitely focuses more on trying to stimulate the real United Nations environment. Therefore, in UN for MUN procedure, any member may submit a draft without minimum support, as we believe that it is their sovereign right as an equal member of the GA to be able to do so. However, we must remind delegates that the most effective drafts are ones that have as much support as possible prior to tabling it. The amendment procedure is initiated in the UN for MUN procedure either by orally proposing it from the floor, if no member objects, or by the means of L documents. Although the procedure almost remains the same as in conventional procedure, it is possible to divide the proposal. For example, the draft resolution with amendments to be voted upon separately directly before final voting. This feature slightly resembles the process of division of question, which you may be more familiar with, as it can be found in a few other procedures in other conferences. Resolutions and amendments can be discussed in informal sessions, which are not speakers list speeches, but moderated by the chair. In the UN for MUN procedure, it is assumed that the draft resolution will be adopted by consensus, and it is only when the consensus does not emerge that the committee moves to voting. So you can see here that it is very important that diplomacy plays a work and you try to lobby with other delegates so that you can reach a common consensus. And this counteracts the tendency in conventional procedure of relying on either simple or special majority. Instead, we encourage the inclusion of all members of the committee. At the end of discussions, the committee moves in the action phase, where the chairs will say, if there are no objections, this resolution will not be adopted by the consensus. And if there are resolutions because the resolution does not fit your stance or anything, then a voting will be conducted and it must be conducted.
Okay,
So
thank
that's
you.
a brief introduction on how the GA works.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deepika and Amelia. We'll see you again at the questions time. And now, to talk about crisis, we'll invite to the stage John Nicholas, Matthew, Gregory, and Max.
Hello. Oh, yeah, hello. So I'm here. We're all here to talk about crisis committees, and they are slightly different to normal committees of a Model United Nations, in that they're quite a lot more fast-paced, and we'll get into stuff like later. But I find the best thing about them is they are just amazingly fun because you have to adapt so often to changing situations. So let's start explaining, shall we? Maulik, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so I'll start by briefly explaining what a crisis committee is. So I think perhaps the coolest part, if you will, about it being in a crisis committee is you have the power to take swift and immediate action by passing something called directives in addition to resolutions. So rather than just being a diplomat trying to negotiate with other diplomats within the UN, you have the full power of a state behind you. In this case, the two superpowers of the 20th century, the Soviet Union and the United States. These actions are reflected immediately on the committee through something called crisis updates, which are speeches, news releases, or videos. The action can also be covert through personal directives, where delegates can achieve their own goals in an arc. And these are really brilliant crisis updates because they really immerse you into what you're imagining this is. And when you're in such positions as the people in charge of the Soviet Union and the United States during the space race, it does feel really awesome. So how do they work? Crisis committees work. So when there is an essential development in this quote unquote universe, or in this case, kind of the world during the Cold War, the crisis director, who is Theo Williams for the USSR, and someone I can't remember the name of, apologies to them, for the United States. And they will often conduct a crisis update. And in this circumstance, he, she, or they will give a rundown of the current situation and the most recent actions taken. Afterward, there will be a short question and answer period where delegates may ask guiding questions which will help draft a response on behalf of your cabinet. It is advisable to take detailed notes so that a delegate is best prepared to respond, especially with times such as tense as the Cold War. All right, we'll now move over to Matthew, I think.
Thank you, Greg. So now we're going to move on to directives, which are really the driving force of your Joint Crisis Committee. As Gregory mentioned, as you guys are basically state actors in the Joint Crisis Committees. You guys have the power of an entire state to perform all sorts of actions, and these actions are conducted via directives. So there are multiple types of directives, including public and private ones. So first, we're just going to explore public and private ones. Public directives typically represent the committee's response as a whole to the update. The characteristics of a public directive include they are worded like a resolution, except there are no preambulatory clauses and often command direct action. They also require the aforementioned motion to introduce directive and require a simple majority to pass. For private directives, there are 4 different types of private directives, each having its benefits and drawbacks of using. So you have private covert directives, private overt directives, joint private covert directives, and joint private overt directives. Sounds like a mouthful, but don't worry, we're going to explain those to you very soon.
So the types of private directives are actually really simple. It's one of the very few things you don't want to overthink. Basically, there's going to be a Google form, and the way it's going to work is that for a private covert directive, a delegate is taking action without consent of the committee. So it's one person doing it by themselves. So for example, in this presentation, it talks about military or economic activity. And so the thing with the private covert directive is that you want to be really specific, and you want to also make sure you should do this anyway, but especially with the private covert directive, you should be acting within the boundaries of what your power can do. So you'll be assigned a specific role, and you're going to have to stay in those boundaries. So the defining characteristics of a private covert directive is that the content of the directive, will not be disclosed to the committee, unless they want it to, and it's usually for something pretty serious. And then the private overt directive is similar, because the delegate's taking action without the committee's consent, but it will be announced to the committee, even though the committee didn't initiate it as a whole. It's just one person who initiated it. So as the presentation says, it can be a little risky, because the delegates in the rest of the committee know the action and who started it. So of course, if it's something that they don't like or don't agree with, that could be a problem. And the reason one would want to do a private overt directive is to commit an action by themselves, but also to make a public statement. And again, you want to stay within the boundaries of your power.
All right. So now we move on to the last two private directives, which is joint private covert directive and joint private overt directive. Honestly, these two, like as Max said in the last slide, please do not overthink this, as these are both the plural forms of what Max was talking about. So joint private covert directive, it is very similar, as I mentioned, to the private covert directive, but it's the idea that multiple delegates are proposing this idea. As again, this is most often seen in joint military or economic actions, and these include formation of secret alliances because the people that are forming this directive are multiple delegations and not just one. And so, of course, there has to be a consent of both countries proposing it, or else this is not really the definition of joint. So there needs to be consent throughout. And it has a similar, more or less, if not the same outcome as a private covert directive. And again, please be specific as possible and to always be within the boundaries of one's powers, nation powers, or portfolio powers. I personally recommend to do a joint private covert directive if you feel that the idea that you're putting up may not apply to a lot of other delegates, but may apply to you both, and so may be seen as controversial in a way, and that it would be better to privately address it instead rather than taking the risk and having your idea declined. And then now we move on to joint private overt directive. So it's like a private overt directive where a group of countries like want to take action and want to voice it out to the rest of the committee, and so therefore the staff members will voice it out. Again, there has to be also consent of all parties proposing, of all parties proposing it, and basically it needs to have the same objectives as proposing a private covert directive, except that the entire committee will know. It may seem risky, as Max said, for joint private, for private overt directive. Same thing with joint private overt directives. However, it would be a better way to voice out your own ideas and give a speech as to why this idea is great. I mean, I think someone mentioned this in a previous slide. UN Form MUN is a shift between competition format into a more cooperation format, and that's what we want to do. We want to be as transparent to everyone as possible and not hide ideas and treat it as a competition, because being transparent is the way to go with this format. And this is why I also do recommend joint or private overt directives. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so thank you very much. We'll now talk about how to research for our conference. Malik, next slide, please. So I can give you 4 tips for researching. First of all, read the background guide. It was sent to you via email and it is available at our new website. Yay! And They are really detailed. They are made by our amazing chairs that you saw already, and more about it. Afterwards, you can please research more about the topic online. You can research at many pages, but please be sure to know that if it is credible. So don't use Wikipedia or other sites like this. Use like good sites, not bad sites. Step three: if there is any question, anything that you want to ask, anything that you don't understand, anything like this, ask your chairs. They are here to help you and to elevate you, guys. This is only just for you. And finally, get to know your block peers because you're going to work at a lot of time of a conference with them. So it will be very good if you get to know your block peers and get to start work on a resolution of sorts. Malik, next slide, please. And now, we'll give you some tips and tricks for your future MUN conference. Okay, Malik, next slide, please. So I'll start with general tips from the Secretariat. So first of all, speak. The more you speak, the bigger the chance that you'll get an award. Because if you don't speak, people will not notice you. Trust me, I know that. Smile. If you smile, people will smile back at you. And this is very true. Don't come to the committee with a bad face on or like a very sad face. Come with happiness, with optimism, and people will be very optimistic to you. Innovate. Have new and unique ideas at your disposal. Be ready to think and innovate at any other occasion. Ask questions. If you don't ask them, how would you know? Because MUN is an educational activity, and we're here for your education. Have fun. You're here and you deserve it. You enjoy the moment, and let yourself have fun, because that's what is the most important thing at MUN is to have fun, not getting an award. And finally, respect. Give respect to anyone, whether it's a fellow delegate, your chair, or one of the secretaries. Malik. And now we'll hear some tips from our chairs and from Malik. So let's start with Malik.
All right, the first tip that I would like to give to everyone watching this and to all the delegates coming from delegation, we are so glad to have you all at the conference. Uh, so the first step is as follows. I would strongly recommend you to constantly lobby and look forward who your allies are, so that as you all are aware after the training session that UN for MUN is more of a resolution based ROP. So the ROP has the the resolution thing has a lot of weightage in this ROP, and therefore making alliances and lobbying is a very essential part of this ROP. Here, back to you.
Okay, now Deepika, your tip.
Hello. So I think one of the main tips I would like to give, as like since I've been a delegate, I've been chairing, I've been in secretaries, I think one of the main things that I look for when I'm chairing is probably the way they like speak, like the content of their speech. It's more of no matter how many times you speak, I think one thing that should be really important is the quality of your speech. You speak many times, but then you repeat the same thing, you change the things and say it. That does not cut it. So try to get more like quality in your speeches. It should have different content, something which is diverse, something which is going to connect with the other delegates in the committee so that you can form alliances with them. And apart from this, I probably look for leadership because A leader is someone who leads people. He does not rule them, it's more like he leads them. So maybe try to lead all the delegates in the committee, try to work with them together. And since UN4MUN is more of a resolution based one, just like Malik said, the moment you start leading, there is no doubt that you're gonna get the best resolution ever. And also, you being a leader shows how much of a potential you have. And that is one of the key features or characteristics that I personally look for in a delegate, in a best delegate, or any award winning delegate.
Okay, now we'll move to Gregory and his tip.
Okay, so for all of you, I think what was said about speaking and making sure you're heard is very important. What's equally as important is having something to say. So my tip for all of you would be is whenever something happens or something is discussed in your committees, even if you're not entirely sure as to what it implies, form an opinion of it that is in line with your country's agenda, of course, and stand up and speak about it. Give advice to your fellow delegates. Be passionate as well. Those are all things. You do not need to worry. Of course, research is important, and I would definitely advise that too. But you do not need to worry if you don't know as much as another delegate. You will know enough to be able to give at least advice, if not cold, hard directives or resolutions. That's the most important thing. Making sure you're heard with credible with credible insights rather. And for those with you in crisis, I think the best thing I can say is to be mindful of your station. By which I mean be aware of what your place in the world or in the universe in these crises. And by that I mean, as long as that's the case, you will have a realistic crisis. So make sure you're not, as the USSR, for example, requesting aid from the United Kingdom, which is an ally of the United States at the time. So as long as you keep that, you will have realism, and with that realism comes a really fun and exciting conference that doesn't kind of go too far out the bounds of reality. And yes, of course, the other thing is to make sure you are heard, and do not underestimate the value of being heard. And okay, that's my tip.
Okay, now we continue to Max. Your tip?
Well, I would say, first of all, this is the first Model UN that I'm helping to run, which is very exciting. But I would also speak to the first timers for first delegates. If this is the first time you've ever been a delegate in a Model UN, that's awesome, because the chairs are doing a really good job and working really hard for it to be easy for you. But the number one thing I would say, especially for newcomers, is just don't be afraid. It's not the biggest deal in the world if you accidentally say the wrong motion, or you happen to do something that your actual country doesn't stand with in real life once or twice. I mean, obviously you have to try to be perfect, but it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's better to really get your ideas out there and participate than to just sit back and be scared and be overwhelmed by what's happening. So just don't be intimidated.
Okay, thank you, Max. Now, Emilia, your tip?
Hi everyone. So basically, I have been a chair before, and I've been a delegate before. I love crisis committees as well as General Assembly committees. And my tip for everyone to really succeed in months is that this might be a bit, it might contradict a bit, but hang with me. So first and foremost, don't come to a month for the sole purpose of winning an award, because model UNs are meant to be an academic learning experience. And the moment you think that you're just there just to win an award, be it the best delegate and honorable mention, you take away the value of the month itself and you lose yourself. So when you treat it as a learning experience and take it as it is and try your best, that's the moment that you're actually going to do really well, because you'll be open and agreeable to solutions. You won't be totally focused on just winning an award, because I realized that delegates who are there to win a best delegate award are never ever agreeable or amenable to other suggestions or solutions. And because model UNs should focus on the importance of diplomacy in the real world, so you should definitely focus more on coming there for a learning experience and collaborating with other delegates And when you take it as a learning experience, trust me, you have much more fun and you'll be less stressed out. So additionally, if you want to do well in council and you do want to win an award after you treat it as a learning experience, some things that you can do, such as mentioned, as aforementioned by Max and Gregory, is to definitely put yourself out there. Just raise motions and ask, talk during the speakers list, and just try your best. And I've been a delegate before, and I understand that it's nerve wracking. But I promise you, all the chairs, we've been there before, and we're there to guide you. And actually, we'll love to see delegates improving from the first session to the last session, and to see you putting yourself out there more. So that's definitely important, and we would definitely love to see that. And additionally, is consistency. You don't have to dominate a council in order to do really well, but you just have to stay consistent, continuously make speeches that have substance and value add to resolutions, and you definitely do well. And lastly, do know your stance inside out, even if you don't know other countries, because UN for MUN definitely focus on lobbying with one another and finding other countries that agree with your views and your viewpoints. So definitely know your stance as well as which countries support you. Once again, using the example of like North Korea, you don't be United States and you try to lobby with North Korea and try to be and come up. You don't have similar viewpoints, so you shouldn't try to go against your stance because it's something that the dais will look unfavorably upon. Other than that, just have fun, and I hope that everybody will try their best and do well. And rest assured, your chairs will be proud of you and will recognize all of your accomplishments.
Okay, thank you so much, Amelia. And now, for our final tip, please welcome John.
Hello, everyone. So for my final tip, it would just be try to be as aware as possible in who is part of your block and all the blocks and as much blocks as you can notice in the conference, because especially let's begin with crisis committees, especially if you want to go form a private covert directive or a private overt directive. Um, Especially private overt directives, you would want to have the correct people that you know is trustworthy and really supports your ideas, rather than someone who is more loyal to another block. Because if you ever mention your idea to someone who's more loyal to another block, perhaps they could take your idea and they could tell the other block, and then perhaps they can either copy it and make it better, or aside from that, they can perhaps ruin the purpose of what a private overt directive is, which is not addressing the idea because it could be controversial. And yeah, also if you form resolutions with people not on your block, or perhaps other people find out what you're writing about as a group, they could potentially tell their entire group and they'll start to form speeches, begin to write amendments to your resolution, or they will try to get as many people to vote against your resolution, because you'll never know what kind of people you'll meet. You'll never know what their ideas are, because they're in many groups and there are many of them. So as much as possible, try to keep your ideas, try to keep your resolutions or your directives to your core block only before the debate time happens, because trust me, it will make your life so much easier, and people will be a lot less prepared to try and attack you and try to ask pretty stressful POIs. So just keep that in mind, and your MUN ideas will be so much more easier. Now we'll move on to section 7 and 8.
Yeah, now we'll move on to sections 7 and 8, which are Q&A and goodbye. So now it's time for you guys to ask us questions. Anything that you don't have understood, or anything that you might have missed, or if you just want to ask us a question about MUN, please ask it in the live stream comments, which are, I think, right here to the right, and we'll answer them. We'll firstly look at some questions that were asked, and I'll have here some of our staff now. So let's speak for that. Okay. Amelia, Gregory. Okay. John, I'm sorry, but I'll add you in like after like during the questions. So first of all,
Yeah, you can add John and just keep me aside.
okay. First of all, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, mate. Who's from Indonesia? I'm not. No one from here is from Indonesia, but let me tell you that we have a lot of Indonesian people at our conference. I'm given New Zealand. Congratulations. Together MUN, we're grateful to have our delegation attending your conference. We're presenting this in our club meeting and our delegates love it. Thank you very much. A shout out to you guys. Next up, a question. Hey guys, are we having the conference call through Zoom? Yes, we are going to have the conference through Zoom, except the opening and closing ceremonies that are going to be on YouTube. Yes, our delegates have a lot of questions. So fire them at us, guys. Okay, so while we're waiting for more questions, maybe we can all tell something funny about themselves.
All right, I'll go first because I have something really funny. So my ears move on their own sometimes, and it's so weird. I feel like a baby elephant sometimes. Well, okay, they just move sometimes. That's weird and funny. I don't know. And I didn't know this until my mom noticed it, and she's like, "Your ears are moving," and I'm like, "What? What just happened?" And then I realized that my ears move on their own.
Okay, and we have our first question from the delegation. Firstly, what time in total is the opening speeches? So let me tell you, I will answer this very shortly. We'll answer this very shortly. I'm going to tell you that it's going to be around 1 hour and a half, 2 hours on the schedule. Anyone else that has funny thing to tell about themselves while we're waiting
Sure.
for questions?
Okay, so I'll go. I'm 16 and I've never worn glasses my entire life. But I think at the start of this year, I realized I was having some trouble seeing, but I just chalked it up to like me sitting at the back of the class. So I did get my eyes checked recently, and turns out while my left eye is perfect, my right eye degree is actually 150, and I've gone about 2 years without getting my eyes checked and realizing I needed glasses.
Wow. Okay, so we have more questions. Okay, cool. YouTube will be cool with me. So guys, the conference starts on the 2nd of January, but when will it end? Do anyone want to answer it?
Sure. So it's a one-day conference, Omar. It's going to be a total between the beginning of the opening ceremony and the end of the closing ceremony of 8 hours on the 2nd of January. Yeah, hope that answers your question. It's just one day to keep it more accessible for everyone.
And can you talk more on MUN, please? Okay, we can talk about MUN. What do you want us to talk about? Okay, we have one more question. Is caucusing important? If why? Gregory.
Caucusing is extremely important, by which I mean it's probably among the most important parts of a conference. I'll tell you about how my first ever MUN went down, and that was at Cambridge University. It was a crisis, but basically it was a crisis that included the UN Security Council, so they had to do caucusing and they had to pass their own resolutions. And I would say that a large portion of that conference was spent in informal or unmoderated caucuses. And that is when delegates were able to stand up, go mill around the room, talk to delegates who they wanted, and that is where all of the most important negotiating happened. And if it wasn't for caucusing, be they unmoderated or moderated, we wouldn't have had any directives or any resolutions passed through, and the Biafran civil or otherwise the Nigerian civil war, which was what that crisis was about, would have been going on all the way until 2020, or who knows. And so, caucusing is probably, it's the prerequisite to getting directives and resolutions written. You can't write them without it.
Okay, one more question. How does crisis committee end? Because it seems never ending, like crisis keeps on coming in, right? So who wants to answer it?
Well, I might not be in crisis. I'll just briefly answer before anyone else wants to take over. Crisis committee ends mainly, they're like karmas, like questions a resolution must answer in regular resolutions. But these are things that your crisis directors and your crisis staff want to see you answer. And they usually already have a crisis arc and a rough plan on how crisis will go on. But sometimes it just doesn't end given the time constraint, and sometimes it does, like if you actually resolve like the issue. For example, if we're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, so maybe if you solve the issue and prevent USA and USSR from going to a full-blown nuclear war, then you solve the issue. But for example, you solve the issue before committee session ends, then your crisis directors and crisis staff will continue to work on it and give you a crisis arc such as, oh, how can the presidents like JFK and Khrushchev actually work together to create better ties with one another? Maybe establishing the red hotline wasn't enough. So the crisis staff will definitely help and guide you along the way. But there's definitely like a main issue that you're supposed to answer. And if it's not answered, then it's a loss. But usually like the crisis staff will actually oversee the entire process and actually decide whether they want to end it earlier or maybe they're going to guide you along the way. And I'll actually like a crisis staff to explain further.
Going on from that, your chairs will guide you through to a natural end. So you don't need to worry too much about it going on and on and on, because they'll have a certain amount of updates prepared. And obviously, with regards to things like the space race, races have finish lines. Eventually, one of these countries will cross it, and therefore it also is natural end. And then, at chair's discretion, generally speaking, there will come a point where the delegates do not see anything else to do. They believe that the crisis has reached its natural end, that it's time to close a book on this chapter of the Cold War, and at chair's discretion, they will call a vote and you will adjourn, and then we'll deliberate awards and that sort of thing, and it's all very exciting, all that waiting for that part of the conference. So the chair, lots of the chairs are experienced, and if they're not, they're very much clever and intelligent people who will be able to pick this sort of thing up. And they will guide you through to a natural end. You don't need to worry about it going on for endlessly long.
Okay, our next question is, you're so helpful, thank you. Is there TogetherMUN 3? I can't tell you if there will be or there will not be TogetherMUN 3, but there will be some amazing news coming up during the conference, and you should stick around because we have a secret surprise for you. We'll entertain 2 more questions. Because of different time zone, I'm afraid I'll fall asleep. What time will exactly be the MUN starts and end? So John.
So the time schedule here follows GMT plus 0, so it's exact Greenwich Mean Time. So the conference starts at 8:30 GMT plus 0 and AM, and then it will end at 16:10, which is 4:10 PM in GMT plus 0. I hope it answers your question. So it's actually just short of 8 hours.
Okay, and the final question. What is MUN all about, and how should we, the delegates, go about it? Deepika.
So I'm going to keep this really, really short because I'm not going to drag it along. So Yeah, I get it. So, yeah. So, an MUN is actually the abbreviation of a Model United Nations, and Model United Nations is all about simulating the United Nations committees. So, basically, United Nations, like Model United Nations, talk about important global affairs and issues that have been around for many years, or maybe for historical crisis committees, since I've chaired one of historical crisis committees. So that particularly includes about things that have already happened, and maybe there can be a different approach for it. And normally, it's like global affairs or issues that have been going on that should be like have some solutions. And how should you as a delegate go about it? So basically, there is a whole study guide written, so you can go. So basically, it covers all the major issues that have happened. And for example, there's history of the particular agenda, then it's about what is the present condition related to the agenda, and then there are going to be past international actions taken. So there are a lot of parts to it. So basically, you read through all that, you research about all of it. There's a particular nation that you're representing, or maybe a particular person if it's a Senate, or maybe AIPPM, which is for India, basically. So what exactly happens is that you research all about the agenda, and then you research about the nation you're representing or the person you're representing. You'll see how that particular nation or person behaves in the committee in real life, and then you simulate the exact same thing in a model UN. But yeah, I'm just wrapping it up. Don't worry. So basically the whole point is solving the issue given in the agenda with cooperation and coming together and solving everything on a on an international platform. That is all about it. It's all about spreading peace and positivity around the world. Here, I think you're on mute because I cannot hear you.
Oh my god. Thank you for answering these questions. Thank you. Have you guys ever met physical? No. We're all from different countries all over the world. And finally, our delegates have more questions. Where do we ask them? Okay. And Mali, can you share the screen? And I want this. Okay. Now, can you move to the next slide? Because that answers. Okay. So you can contact us at TogetherMUN at gmail.com. This is our email, but we'll prefer if you guys contact us on our Instagram, together.mun. You can also check out our website, and this presentation will be sent to you right after this webinar ends. Malik, can you continue? We have one more thing to show you today, said Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. And now, please welcome our schedule. Malik, please elaborate on it.
All right. So, this is the schedule, which is going to be out on our page probably tonight or tomorrow morning, as per our media's calendar, and it runs from 8:30 p.m. GMT. Sorry, 8:30 a.m. GMT plus zero the to 16:10 p.m. The mass crisis and the closing and opening are optional events which would stream live on the YouTube as now we are doing. So
Wait, I have to
basically the
correct.
committee sessions
I
would
have to
be for
correct you at one thing.
yeah,
Mass
mass
crisis
crisis
will be on
would be
Zoom. Only
yeah,
opening ceremony and closing ceremony will be streamed via YouTube. Sorry about
yeah.
this.
So the committee sessions would start from 9 to 2:45. Yeah. So that those are the compulsory sessions that would uh, help you to get your cert. In order to get your certificate, you need to attend the three sessions. And the schedule on our would be out on our Instagram page in 2 3 days probably. I'll make sure that it is out soon. It would be out in GMT plus 0, GMT plus 7, GMT minus 7, GMT minus 5, and GMT plus 5.
Okay, so thank you so much, anyone, for being here and have this um delegate training with us. And I'm so happy to say to you, you're all part of the government family. I know. And we spent an hour together. And let me tell you, our conference is going to be in 1 week. And my heart is already pumping. So I want to thank Emilia, Gregory, Max, Deepika, Malik, and John for being there and helping me with the training session. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you at the conference. Goodbye, good night, and have a good time.